Hello, welcome back to another episode. Today, I want to talk to you about a little bit of a recap of my recent trip that I did a few weeks back and tell you about some of the lessons I learned there. So, I had the opportunity to go with my daughter Tess and go over to Europe. And we flew into Amsterdam and then we took a train to Germany where my brother, his wife, and their daughter live. And my brother is retired and he spoiled us rotten, and it was awesome. It was so fun to have like somebody just completely take care of everything. And my brother planned an amazing experience for Tess and me while we were over visiting them. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the things he did for us. So he lives in Berlin. So he took us all through Berlin and showed us a lot of the main sites from World War II and the Cold War. And so we saw the Berlin Wall, and he took us to different pieces of that. And they even have bricks inlaid in the ground where the wall once was. And then there were several chunks where the wall still stood. And then there was one big long chunk of the wall. And I would guess maybe anywhere from a half a mile to a mile long of this wall. So he took us to go see all of those things. He took us to Hitler's bunker. And so the bunker has been destroyed, but there's a marker there where Hitler's bunker was. Several bridges where they would exchange prisoners. There were, so this is Cold War now, but Checkpoint Charlie, all the stuff with the Stasi's, all this kind of stuff. So he just like took us all over everywhere, and it was amazing. So amazing to actually be there and experiencing this history that we studied so much of last year. He then took Tess and me down, and I always say the city wrong, so I'm going to spell it and then I'll do my best to pronounce it. Dachau, like Dachau. And he took us to a concentration camp. And ooh, that is something I feel like definitely need to be older. They actually recommend that nobody under 12 is there. And there is a reverence to this camp. And like people didn't really talk. It was just this, it was kind of hard and heavy to be there. And I feel like everyone should experience something like this one time. Because just to know like something you want to make sure never happens again. So we went there, and then he took us to Munich, and there was a memorial because in 1972, Munich hosted the Olympics, and some terrorists murdered some of the Jewish athletes. So he took us and saw some of that. Eventually, we actually did a lot of fun stuff too, but I'm just talking some of the highlights of the of war and stuff like that. Eventually, we made our way to Nuremberg, and we went to the Palace of Justice, where the trials for the war crimes began against World War II. So that is some of the places, those are some of the places that my brother took us to. And he is a history buff, and he was even explaining more things. And then the places we went to had a lot of information. Luckily, they also had it in English. And so we were just really immersed into a lot of the things that we had studied last year. As we studied World War One, World War Two, the Cold War, the communist takeover, Russia, all those things. It was just so crazy to be there where it actually was. So, as I was there, I had this thought about knowing people's stories. So, I want to share from you from doinggoodtogether.org. It says, stories are powerful and innately human. They help us understand one another, provide windows into different cultures and time periods, and increase our capacity for empathy. Because they hold great power, the stories kids hear make a difference in how they perceive the world. And I couldn't agree with that more. One of the things that I've seen that coaching has done for me is that it has helped me to love at an even greater level because I hear people's stories. I hear their heartaches, I hear their struggles, and I hear how much they're trying and how much they want something. When I hear their stories, it fills me with compassion and love. And it makes me just want to hug and hold them and just love on them all the more. When our children hear stories of different types of people, it helps them to love them, not fear them, and not hate them. So last year we studied a lot about Russia. We read about the last Tsar and the rise of communism. We read stories of the average person in Russia. We read folk tales and played Russian games and Russian music. My kids and I have a love for the Russian people because we know their story. Just because there might be some bad people in the politics doesn't mean that the Russian people are bad. As I walked through the concentration camp and we walked through the gas chamber and the crematorium, my heart ached. How in the world could a person do this to another human? I would guess that you would have to make that person not human in your mind to be able to do that. When you read stories about the Jewish people, how can you not fall in love with them? I recently had a friend who had an opportunity to go to Jerusalem last year, and she had a Jewish guide who took her all over the city and told her the stories behind all the places they went. She fell in love. She often wears a Star of David now just because she loves the Jewish people so much just from learning their stories. One of the books my daughter and I read last year was The German Wife. It's a fictional story of a German woman whose family is stuck in Germany and has to play the Nazis' game to save her family. She eventually comes to America and is hated because the people assumed she hated Jews and agreed with the Nazis. But when you found out her story, you saw that none of that was true, and you loved her for doing her best in a terrible situation. The world needs more light and love. And an easy way that we can do that with our children are by sharing stories with them. The stories we read to them or we have them read. Your children can fall in love with Brazil by learning about the people there. Listen to their music, make some of their food, and watch how your children will love at a greater level. Now, this isn't to say that you are looking at the world with rose-colored glasses. Yes, bad things do happen. People are choosing to hurt other people. But what good does it do to focus on a few people who are hurting others? I would rather teach my children stories like Corrie ten Boom, who loved the Jewish people and hid them even when it put her own life in danger. Stories of Louis Zamperini, who was a prisoner of war in Japan during World War II and learned to forgive those who had hurt him and turn his life over to God. So the lesson I learned from my recent trip is that when we learn the stories of others, we learn to love them. And loving others is a beautiful place to be. Love you, friends. Talk to you next week.